sometimes control over smaller states in today's world. I'll cover the main tools, how they work in practice, and the limits and costs of each approach. Powerful states don't rely on a single method. Instead, they use a toolbox that mixes overt and covert tactics, economic levers, military presence, political and intelligence operations, and soft power combined with legal, institutional, and private sector channels. The choice of instrument depends on the powerful state's goals: strategic access, regime change, friendly policy, market access, the target's vulnerabilities, international norms, and domestic political constraints. 1. Economic coercion, sanctions, trade, and conditional aid. One of the most visible modern levers is economic pressure. Sanctions, trade restrictions, freezing of assets, and restrictions on access to international finance can strangle a small country's economy or elite networks without firing a shot. Carefully targeted, multilateral sanctions can be effective, but only when they're comprehensive, enforced multilaterally, and when back channels, third country trade, illicit finance, are limited. Piecemeal or unilateral sanctions often produce economic pain for ordinary people, while elites find ways to adapt, reducing political effectiveness and generating humanitarian fallout. Empirical studies emphasize that sanctions work best when they are coordinated, financially comprehensive, and aimed at narrow policy goals rather than wholesale regime change. 2. Debt development finance and infrastructure diplomacy. Powerful states increasingly use loans, investment, and major infrastructure projects as instruments of influence. Large infrastructure packages, ports, railways, power plants create dependencies. The creditor country can influence procurement rules, regulatory choices, and sometimes local politics through project contracts and debt servicing terms. The most prominent modern example is China's Belt and Road Initiative. It combines finance, construction, and long-term commercial ties that expand China's economic footprint across many smaller states. That said, the notion that such lending is always debt-trap diplomacy loans deliberately designed to produce strategic forfeiture of assets is contested. Many analyses find the causes of debt problems are local fiscal management, project viability, and poor contract design rather than a single predatory strategy. Still, the political leverage from major projects can be significant. 3. Military presence and security ties. Bases, port access, training, arms sales, and security partnerships create clear leverage. A forward military presence gives a powerful state rapid projection capability and bargaining chips in diplomacy. Access agreements, overflight rights, or cooperation on counterterrorism often come with political expectations. Military aid and arms sales can bind recipient security services to donor priorities and doctrines. However, hard power is expensive, politically risky, and often creates blowback or nationalist resistance in the target country, which can erode long-term influence even when short-term control is achieved. See the world map of military basing and presence for a visual sense of how projection is deployed. 4. Covert action, covert political influence, and regime change. History shows that intelligence agencies and proxy groups have been used to disrupt, topple, or install governments aligned with a powerful state's interests. Covert operations range from funding political parties and media campaigns to supporting coups or paramilitary forces. While they can produce rapid results, covert actions carry huge moral and legal costs, undermine international norms, and can provoke long-term instability. Moreover, revelations of covert meddling damage the intervener's soft power and global standing. Scholarly reviews of 20th and 21st century interventions document both the frequency of such tactics and their mixed, often destabilizing outcomes. 5. Soft power, cultural diplomacy, and normative influence. Not all influence is coercive. Powerful countries invest in culture, education, media, development programs, exchange scholarships, and international institutions to win hearts and minds. Over time, cultural affinity, shared norms, and institutional participation can align elites and publics in ways that reduce the need for coercion. Soft power is slower and subtler. It builds credibility and networks that pay dividends during crises and negotiations. Institutions like international organizations, cultural exchange programs, and aid that emphasizes capacity building are classic soft power tools. 6. Cyber operations, information warfare, and economic statecraft. In the digital era, influence also travels through cyberspace. Targeted disinformation campaigns, hack and leak operations, and economic pressure applied through control of critical technology supply chains. These tools can shape political narratives, disrupt institutions, or impose hidden costs on rivals without kinetic conflict. Because they operate in legal and normative gray zones, they're attractive, but they also risk escalation and reciprocal measures that can destabilize international norms. 7. Law, institutions, and multilateral architectures. Powerful states use international law, multilateral institutions, and economic governance bodies to shape rules in ways that advantage them. Control of standards, voting shares in financial institutions, and treaty making can translate soft structural power into durable influence over smaller states' policy space. Limits, checks, and risks. None of these tools guarantees durable control. Domestic politics in the target country, nationalist backlash, alternative alignments, for example, smaller states hedging between great powers, and global norms constrain coercion. Moreover, heavy-handed tactics generate reputational costs that reduce long-term influence and invite counter-coalitions. The most sustainable form of influence tends to combine credible security guarantees with economic opportunity and genuine institutional partnerships. Purely coercive approaches often produce instability and long-term resistance. Conclusion. The choice of means matters. Powerful countries today use a blended strategy. Economic leverage and finance, security ties and bases, covert political tools, cyber and information operations, and soft power investments. Each tool has distinct effects, costs, and limits. The countries that manage influence most sustainably are those that mix inducements with institutions and minimize overt coercion that breeds resentment, although short-term geopolitical calculations often push states toward the more coercive instruments with unpredictable and sometimes destructive results. If you want, I can turn this into a shorter briefing or policy memo. Add up-to-date case studies, for example, Sri Lanka, China, U.S. sanctions on Iran, Russia, or interventions in Latin America, with citations and timelines. Which would you like next, a memo, case studies, or 5 downloadable, high-resolution images related to these themes?